the next question to you then would be, so climate change I think you've answered a part of this already, where we discussed how climate change and global warming are used very interchangeably in conversations across the board. And people get confused that, hey, it seems to be getting colder here, and I don't know why people say that climate change is happening or global warming is happening, etc. So um, can you maybe elaborate on that a little bit more for the benefit of our audience?
Yeah, so that the cause effect
Yeah.
chain link is industrialization, carbon dioxide, heat trap, global warming, therefore changes in the way ocean currents, air, weather happens. And that is what we understand as climate change.
Right.
And then that climate change is actually extremities.
Mm-hmm.
A place that didn't used to be warm is now receiving a blast of warm air current. And so it's now become very warm. And then the place that used to be warm is getting the reverse flow of cold air, and that place is complaining that it's cold. Now, it's actually in extremities of hot, cold, wet, and dry.
Right.
Now, these extremities are damaging the food chain. If I take agriculture and the fauna, creatures that are food for a vast majority of the population. When these two pattern changes, that is when climate change pinches, right? So these extremities, hot, cold, wet, and dry, when they impact us, then that's the pinch of climate change. And it should be understood as extremities or patterns not seen before in that kind of location, right? And because it is not native to that location, the disruption that it causes. So now I don't think anyone in Australia, your wildfires, the stuff that's happened in Sydney, the flooding happens in Western Australia, India is no exception, US is no exception. And what really actually, this might sound cruel, but when a multi-billionaire software type that lives in the Napa Valley in California sees his mansion subside, and millions of dollars worth of property and memories get, or indeed the entire place got charred seasonally over the last 4 years, maybe that's when everyone will really sit up and take notice, when it pinches. So please understand, climate change is extremities, hot, cold, wet, dry. The consequences of that we've already talked about.
Right. That makes a lot of sense, Mr. Sushil, because there, until people are pushed to the edge, they don't really realize that change is happening. And it's difficult, of course, as humans to observe change through, such long periods of time and things that we are so used to, things that are happening in our environment, unless it's an extremity. Of course.
So I think COVID is a great example of extremity, and we adapted.
Yeah.
We were forced to do things we couldn't have dreamt of. But we did it.
Right.
So when it pinches, you're able to do it. Now it's up to you. Do you want to be in a situation where you gradually climb the slope and conquer your problems? Or you want to be faced with a cliff? We are assuming science can solve, those of us who are assuming that science can solve.
Yeah.
Science can solve perhaps a gradient better than it can solve a cliff. We should consider that also. If you're told to jump 200 feet, is that easier, or is taking the long circuitous route and gradual steps going to be easier?
That makes a lot of sense. So I guess we'll move on to our next question. We have discussed this already to some extent, which was you have mentioned how extremities are the name of the game when it comes to climate change. So are there any specific alarming consequences apart from the extremities that you mentioned, and that we are likely to witness and are currently witnessing that we don't realize is because of climate change?
Yeah, so we do a lot of work on sustainability reporting. So one of the things that organizations have to start reporting on is climate-related risks and opportunities. And if I did a deep study of Unilever's sustainability report, and indeed of the coffee industry as well. So if you go down to industry level analysis, you will find that coffee growers are worrying about changes in temperature. And so let's say you're growing coffee at 3,000 feet above sea level. The temperature, the environment over there is of a particular kind. At that elevation, there is no frost. You have a certain temperature, a certain humidity. Suddenly, the temperature goes up by 4 degrees at the wrong time in the growing season. And a country like Colombia, a country like India, a country like Kenya, and interestingly, most of these agricultural countries in coffee are in what's known as the global south.
Right.
Their populations are earning a little bit of livelihood from exporting high value products like coffee to the global north. Now, their ability to earn a livelihood from coffee is going to get dented because of
climate change.
It's one very interesting data that 80% of global resources are consumed by 20% of the world. OECD 7 plus China consumes a large proportion. If I take it as by people, then India and China are 40% of the world population, 42% of the world population. And then there's this OECD 7 that has a population of about 15% of the world. So 15% of the population consumes 80% of the resources. But climate change doesn't visit the person that necessarily sinned. An innocent farmer that's growing crop in Kenya, exporting it and eking out a livelihood and trying to better his family's life may pay the price for something that happened either in an industrial hub in India or China or in the global north. So the guys who are paying the price are not necessarily the persons who are responsible for this. So food crop patterns, production capability, all of this is, so you have this in coffee, you have this in rice, you have this in wheat. You're going to get this in seafood very quickly. The general heating of the water, you know how much it takes to boil an ocean? There's an English expression. If somebody is trying to do the impossible, it's called boiling the ocean.
Boiling the ocean, yeah.
Mankind actually managed to boil the ocean on the coast of the US, where the fish have died because temperature crossed 101 degrees Fahrenheit. The fish died just from plain hot water. There's another expression, hey, I want that job done quickly. Let it not move at a glacial pace. This is an English expression. Today, a glacial pace is a quick way to get the job done. The glaciers are melting at that speed.
Yeah. That sounds
very tangible outcomes, consequences.
Yes. That's very unfortunate. Those expressions that you mentioned describe it perfectly, how our world has now changed. What we used to observe earlier, and now the world that we are living in has, but probably we'll have to come up with different idioms at this point because the old ones don't make any sense anymore.
Well said.
Also, I think there, from my little bit of understanding, there's also a large amount of, cyclones, typhoons, etc., issues that happen, especially with island nations or with countries that have like a long coastline. Even India has a long coastline, so they are suffering because of it. We have seen how flooding is also become such a big issue with Pakistan, India recently, and then of course the global heat wave that you already sort of touched on about the California wildfires, etc., and in Australia as well. So yes, it does seem like those extremities are going to cause a lot of trouble in the coming future. Yeah.